Welcome back. We are a little bit behind. We'll need to speed up the coverage. So the lab is a little bit ahead, especially for those of you who already did the lab. So hopefully we will catch up. All right, so this is where we stopped. So far in terms of for CSS, we have seen the basic idea of CSS, various selectors. And then we started looking into styling text in terms of color, font, and we also see styling lists, choosing different style for the bullet points or removing the bullet points altogether. Now, another important aspect of styling is the concept of box model. So every element of the page, is a box. And then you can use CSS to style the padding, the border, and the margin. So these are three concepts. So the padding, what is the concept of padding? So the space between the content and the border is called padding. So this space. So for example, in the real world, if you have an expensive picture and you want to put a frame, usually they don't put the frame immediately on the edge of the picture. They put some padding. So this space between the, let's say, the frame and the actual content is called padding. Yeah. And then we have the border. The border is a box around our content. And then we have the margin. Because usually contents, they have sibling, they have contents beside them or contents above them, beneath them. So the margin controls the spacing between elements of the page. So these are the key concepts. And this concept is called the box model. Every element on the page is a box, and you can control these three aspects: the padding, the border, and the margin. So you need to know what these concepts are and how to control them. Okay, so when it comes to margin or padding, you can, for example, here I come along and say, I want my margin to be 0.8 rem. What does this mean? What rem means? It's a unit of measurement. That means what? So basically the font size of the root element, which is the HTML element. So for example, if the font size is 16, your margin will be 0.8 times 16. So you can, of course, put an absolute value. You can say, I want my margin to be 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 25 pixels. But much better to make it relative to the font size. So if my font size is big, what will happen to the margin? It will be proportional. It will increase proportionally to the font size. It gives much better responsive, much better user experience. Everything is proportional. Not I have a large font and the margin is still very small and elements are too close to each other. So better not to use absolute values, and try as much as possible to use relative values. Either rem, relative to the size will be relative to the font size, or EM, which is font relative to the closest parent. Rem is more commonly used. So in here, if you put margin 0.8 rem, the browser will go ahead, take your element, and put a margin on all sides, the top, right, bottom, left. All of them will have 0.8 rem space between my element and the other adjacent elements. Difference, you can use margin and padding. You can use different syntax. If you put one value, it will be applied to all sides. If you put two values, the first value will apply to the top and bottom, and the second value will apply to the left and right. Or if you wish, you could specify all of them, 4 values. The first one, it goes top, right, bottom, left, clockwise, top, right, bottom, left. And the same thing for padding. Same syntax for padding, same syntax for margin. You can do it this way. This is the common way of doing it. Or if you wish, you could say margin left, margin top, margin bottom, margin right. You do basically margin dash which side you want, left, right, top, bottom. Or you can use, this is the more concise syntax. With one property, you can specify the padding on all the padding or margin on all sides. Now for the border, again, you can style the border either using this individual sub properties, so border width, 1 pixel thickness of the line around my content, and I want it to be a solid line. You can have a dotted line, you can have dashed line, and I want it to be the color to be red, for example, in this scenario. This is one way of doing it. Or there is a shorthand which is commonly used. You do border. I want the thickness of the border to be 1 pixel. I want it to be a solid line, and the color is red. So in one line, you can set the border. So this is the most common way of doing it. If you want, in some very rare cases, you can specify different style for different sides. You can say border top, border bottom, border right, border left. You can have different borders for different sides of your element, but not very common. Border, keep it simple, and set some properties. Clear? The concept of a box model and the three properties you can set: the padding, space between the content and the border, and you have the border itself. You can style the border itself, and you can style the margin, which is the space between your elements and surrounding or adjacent elements. So that's basically the concept. So let us see some concrete example here. So if I come here, let me show you. So what I have here a div. I could use an article if I wish. Maybe it's better. Article. And it has two elements, an image and a paragraph, an image and paragraph. And what I'm saying here, I want you to give some padding of 0.5 m or rem or 1 rem, for example, save. You can see here it controls the space between the content and the border. And I want the border to be 1 pixel, solid line, and this brownish color. You can see it there. I want the width of my box to be 80% of the available space. You see here I can put, for example, 100%. It will stretch the whole available space. I want to leave a bit of space, 80%, and then I come here and say margin auto. What margin auto will do, I'm telling the browser, go ahead and center my box. Define by yourself, go ahead and compute how much margin on the right and the left in a way that it will be equal division of the available space. Okay, so that's basically what auto does. It auto computes the margin in a way to make your content centered. Very commonly used. Now, that's it for basic CSS. So we have seen basic CSS selectors, a very important skill. You can go for simple and then go into more sophisticated selectors. And then the basic styling of text, basic styling of this, and the box model, styling of the margin, the border, and the padding. Now, the next topic in CSS is basically the layout, super important concept, and particularly modern web. In modern web, we talk about responsive web design or responsive web page layout. So what do we mean by responsive web design or responsive page layout? What does that mean? What's this word responsive? Yes, please.
Add on French like that.
Okay, close, yes, yes. In a more concrete way, what does that mean? Sorry?
Divide on the screen with me.
Not the size. Basically, we are changing what is known as the layout. What layout means? What does layout mean? Yeah, a little bit more clear. No, but not the order. Basically, the positioning and the spacing. The positioning and the spacing of the element of the page. So we want different layer. Responsive design means we want what? Different layouts for different screen sizes. Different layouts for different screen sizes. Let me show you concretely what this means. So if I come here and go to qu.edu.qa, qu.edu.qa, this is the responsive page. You see here, I don't have my browser space or width is not occupying the whole screen. So what layout do I get? Two column layout in this new section. Take a look. As I expand this, became first of all 2, 4. If I squeeze it more, it doesn't allow me. But let me see. Let me see if I can come here and go to inspect. Go to inspect, and I'll go to this. Why is it so squashed? All right, I'll go and click on this one. Toggle device to device toolbar, and this is how it will look in a Pixel 5 mobile device. What you see here, what layout we got? One column layout. And let's try it with an iPad. Do we have iPad Air? Two column layout. Two column layout for the iPad because it has bigger size than the, and let's say how it will look in a Pro is 2, responsive, and here different sizes, 4 column layout, 2 column layout, and 1 column layout. Can you see here? Basically I get different layouts for different screen sizes. That's what responsive means. So don't confuse it with response time or quick response and the page is responsive. That's not what responsive design means. Responsive, different layouts for different screen sizes. So in here, in this illustration, for big screen, what layout do I have? 3 column layout. For medium, 2 column layout, and for small screen, 1 column layout. So this is what responsive design means. So to achieve responsive design, which is super important these days, because when we open the page on a mobile device, we don't want basically the content to be invisible, and we have to zoom and use scroll bars. We don't want that frustrating user experience. We want very seamless experience when the page is open, the content is visible and readable, and it takes advantage in optimal way, advantage of the available space. Okay, so to do so, we have CSS comes with 3 major capabilities or 3 major features that allows us to achieve this responsive design. So here we have a flex box, we have a grid, and we have media queries. So I'll try to introduce you to this quickly, and hopefully next time I'll show you some more common patterns that you will encounter in the real life and how to deliver them using using basically these 3 techniques. Combination of these 3 or one of them could be enough. So with Flexbox, it gives us one-dimensional layout, either a row or a column. The grid, it gives us a 2D layout, and media query, basically based on available width, we can define different layouts. Usually we start with which layout we start from? mobile first. Always we go with mobile first. Put the optimal viewing experience on a mobile device, and then change the layouts. At least give for medium and large, at least. So you have one layout for medium and one for large. And the default is the mobile first layout. So let's see how this looks like. Let's start with this example that we already have. We already seen together. So let me open it again. Okay, let me do this trick here. All right. All right, just a second. Here it is. All right, here it is. So I had this centered. You see here, by default, I have an image and a paragraph. By default, what is the default layout of these elements on this article? They are stacked one above each other or one beneath each other. So we have the image comes out first, and then we have the text comes after. So if we have a large space, so we may, it's not bad, but we could make it two like we can make them side by side when we have a larger space instead of one beneath the other. So if I want to make this side by side instead of one beneath the other, all I do, I come to the parent of these two elements. I come to the container. So I have the container, which is the article. And within the container, what do I have? Two elements, two child or two items. I have an image and I have some paragraph. And I want to put them side by side. All I do, I'll go ahead and say here, display flex. Display flex, save. And you can see they are side by side. Yeah. Side by side. And I can control, I can say here, go ahead and put some gap of 1 rem. Okay. And there is some gap. You may not see it, but there is some gap there. So let me show you another more important example. Let me show you. Very, very common example, which is creating a menu. Let me just come here. Here is my menu styling. Let me just run this one quickly. Okay. Let me just remove this stuff just to show you quickly. Very common way of creating a menu. Okay, let me just save. Let me also remove this, just super quick. Here it is. Save. Okay. Remove this as well. Okay, so let's start with this. So what we have, this is what most people would do to create a menu in most cases. So I'll go ahead and create a nav element. This is the parent of my menu. And then within this nav, I'll create an unordered list, a UL, and for each menu item will be a list item. And then I'll, you see here by default, I will have, by default, I have these bullet points. I don't want my menu items to have bullet points. That's why I went ahead and said list style, none. I don't want the bullet points. Now, what I want, let's say I want to have horizontal menu. I don't want I don't want them to be stacked one beneath the other. I want to have a horizontal menu. So all I do, I come to the parent of my menu items. I come to the parent. How do I select the parent? One way to select the parent is I go nav and I go UL, that is a descendant of a nav. UL within the nav. And all I do, I'll say here display flex. Just by putting display flex and save. So instead of my child elements being stacked one above the other, they are now horizontally aligned, one next to each other. But there is no space in between them. I go ahead and tell the flex box, please go ahead and put some gap in between of 1 rem. Save. And you can see there is 1 rem space in between them. So we have these two properties, super common, very, very common. We have display flex. By default, the child elements will be side by side in a row, and you can control the spacing between them using the gap. You can also, you see here, it utilized as much space as possible, and it ran out of space. And what it's doing, make it here. There's a bit of cuts. Some content is cut. Some content become 2 lines. Let's make it a little bit more responsive. If we don't have enough space, we can come along and say flex wrap, and I'll say go ahead and wrap to another. Go ahead and wrap to another line when you run out of space. See, when I run out of space, I make it wrap. And now it is much better and responsive. If I have more space, it's in 1 line. If I have less space, it creates more lines as needed. So this is one, you can see it's already responsive just with these 3 lines. I don't know why the wrap is not the default. Maybe it's strange choice. Wrap would be much nicer default. But anyway, just be aware, wrap is not the default. If you want your flex item to wrap to a new line where there is no more space left, you have to put flex wrap here and assign a wrap to it. So with these 3 properties, I already achieved a nice responsive design super nicely like this. Okay. Now by default, the flex has the direction. What is the default direction? Row. That's the default direction. I can change it. If I want the menu to be on the side, let's say on the left side, I can come along and say flex direction, column. Save, and they become side by side like this. Okay. And if I want to make them centered, I can say here justify content center, and they will be. Okay, why they are not centered? The line items center. Yeah, the line items, yes, thank you. So basically, I can come along now using some properties. I can change the positioning, the spacing between the Flexbox items. So that's the basic idea of Flexbox. I create a one-dimensional layout, and I choose a direction. By default is row. You can make it column if you wish, and you can control the gap, you can control the spacing, you can control the alignment using some simple properties, such as in our case, align items, which will align items, in this case, to center. By default is start, I think. Yeah, by default is the start. I can put them on the other side and, or I can center them. Yeah, can center them and so on. Okay, so these are the basic properties of Flexbox. So to summarize, so Flexbox allow me to create a one-dimensional layout. By default is a row direction, and I can use some properties that Flexbox gives me to control, such as gap, to control the spacing and the distribution of the space between the items of my Flexbox. So that's the basic idea. Now let's move to the next one. There are other properties. Maybe I will discuss them in the maybe next session. I just want to give you some glimpse So those of you who didn't go to the lab yet, they have at least have some idea what these layouts are all about. Here is the grid. So the grid, in the grid, what we have is I can create a two-dimensional layout. So I have rows and columns, So one way to, let's take a small example. Here it is. So let me just try to open another project. Yeah, here is the layouts project. And let's take a responsive grid. Okay, so let's first run it to see how it looks, and then we'll do it together. So you see here, I have a grid layout. When I have you don't have enough space, it's one column layout. So as soon as I get enough space, 600 pixels and above, I switch to two column layouts. And if I have 900 pixels and above, I switch to three column layout. Okay, so this is what I mean by responsive. Different layouts for different screen sizes. Super easy to do. So let's focus on how it is done. So always I have some kind of container and some child element of that container. In here, what do I have? An unordered list, and I have three list items. So these list items, by default, if I don't do anything, how they will be displayed? One beneath the other. That's the default behavior. Now, if I have more space, like let's say 600 and above, I'll go for two column layouts. If I have more than 900, I go for three column layouts. Okay, so let me show you how we can do that. Super easy. All I do, I'll go to the parents. Remember, the display grid, we put it on the container, on the parent element. We don't put it on the child elements. So I don't go and put the display grid on the list item. I put it on the UL, the unordered list, which is the parent of these list items. So all I do, as you see here, I'll go and say display grid. That's it. Now, let me first comment this. And let me save. So if I just do display grid, there's nothing interesting here. It's still stuck one above the other, except here we have some gap that I'm controlling using this grid gap 0.8 rem. Okay, now if I want to have multiple columns in my grid, then I'll go ahead and say grid template columns. So how many columns do I want? Of course, I can do 50%, two columns of 50% each. I can do this, of course, if I wish. Let me say you can see two columns. This is not the best way of doing it. There is a new, with the grid, it comes another unit of measurement. I tell the browser, I want you to go and say, give one fraction of the available space to the first column and one fraction to the second column. So I'll get this two column layouts. So I'll save and I get two column layouts. If I want three column layouts, I go and say 1FR here. So I'll want you to go and create three column layouts, save. And here is my three column layout using 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. 1FR means one fraction for each. Be fair and give one fraction for each. If I want, I can say 2FR, 1FR, 1FR. What does that mean? First column will have 50% of the space, and the last two columns will share the remaining 50%. So it will be 50%, 25, 25. See here, this is occupying 2 times the space of the other two. So let's keep it equal. 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. If you find yourself typing this 1FR multiple times, you go and say repeat 2 or 3 or whatever columns you wish, whatever number of columns you wish, and you say 3, then this 1FR. The same as doing 1FR, 1FR. Okay. But this is still not responsive. If I have a small screen, still 3. Sorry. If I have small screen, is big screen, still 3. Small, medium screen, still 3 columns. And even small screen, still 3 columns. Okay. If I have a large content in here, it will be much harder to read because this will be squeezed and not very easy to read. So this is still not responsive. How do I make it responsive? So I'll go ahead and do some media query where basically, let's do it together here. So I'll say here media. I can do media query that will be applicable when you are viewing the content on the screen. I can do another layout when print. Anyway, that is beyond our scope. Let's just keep it simple for now. Just say here media. And then when you have a min width. Okay, let's just uncomment this one just for the time. So here I say min width. So if you have at least 600 pixels, go ahead and apply this grid column template. Make it 1FR, 1FR. If it's minimum, you have 900 pixels, go for 3 FRs. So basically, media query will provide different layouts. This is for the big screen, three column layouts. For medium screen, 2 column layouts. And the default is 1 column layout. The default is always go for the mobile first, which is not many columns, just 1 column. So, and then what I do, I remove this hard-coded template in here. I remove this hard-coded template and basically make my template depend on the width, the available width. So if the width is large, I go for 3 columns. If it's medium, 2 columns. Otherwise, I'll keep the default, which is the 1 column layout. Is clear the idea of media queries and grid? So I play with different templates based on the available width. Okay, now of course we have a lot of properties to control the gap between the elements by using the grid gap, and I can specify. Always try to specify the gap as a relative to the font size using the rem unit of measurement. Don't put a hard-coded value. Always relative is much better. Now, you can of course control. You can control the alignments, justify items. Like you can do justify items. If you assign start, all the items will be aligned to the left. Center, justify enters, justify item center will be centered on each column, and end will be centered to the right, and stretch is the default. So you see here, this is the default behave. They are stretched. The columns are stretched to fill the available space. Like if I don't want them to be stretched, I can go ahead and change these justify items to a different value. So here, align items. So justify items controls the alignment across the row axis, whether you want them to be aligned left using start, aligned middle center, aligned end, align them to the right. And align items allows us to define the alignment along the cross axis, along the column axis. So if I do align item start, all these stacked at the top or stacked at the bottom or centered or stretched, and the default is stretched. Okay, so there are many properties you can play with. I won't go into a lot of details here, maybe at later stage. What I want to show you now is some realistic common patterns that you will see on the web and how we can achieve them using Flexbox, Grid, and media queries, a combination of these three. Of course, we always keep it minimal. If you can achieve it with one line, go for it. If that line that you added is not enough, add more properties. But keep it minimalistic. The minimal styles that are needed to achieve the layout you need, and keep using these extra properties as you need them to achieve the layout needed. Okay, now for the media query, I already explained it. Media query is what you are using, what you are defining. You are defining a breakpoint. Here, using media, at media, this is the syntax that comes with CSS. You are asking the browser, watch for me the width, and this is the breakpoint. Once you have 700 pixels and above, go ahead and apply this style. In our case, go ahead and apply this template columns that we have here. And at least in the beginning, at least go for small, medium, and large. This is the default. You don't need to create a media query for the default. The default is one, let's say, most of the time, one column layout. Then you create different, you create one media query for medium-sized devices and one media query for large-sized devices. And you can have this responsive layout based on the screen size. Now, there are some common layouts. I got them from this lady working with Prompt team. She has very nice common patterns on how to deliver them. So that's one way of learning these Flexbox, Grid, and media queries in a practical way, how you see this in real world. All right, so let us see. The first thing you will find super common is how to create a menu on a website. So basically, close your eyes and go ahead, create a nav elements within the nav, create an unordered list, and each menu item is a list item. And then go to the UL and apply a flex. Go ahead and apply flex, put some gap. You can keep it simple by just putting a gap like this. This will put a one rem on all sides, in terms of horizontally and vertically, it will put the same gap. If you want to be more sophisticated, you can say horizontally, I want you to have the elements spaced using 0.0. Horizontally, I want to have 0.4 rem gap between elements, and vertically, I want to have 1 rem gap between the elements. And most likely, make the flex wrap, as I showed you earlier. So if you run out of space, the menu the menu items will move to the next one automatically. So that's one. This is already we've seen. So using display flex, you can create very nice responsive menu, as I showed you earlier. Another common layout that you see on the web all the time is this lineup card. I'm sure you have seen some cards like this, where you have some header, maybe sometimes some little image, some text, some little image, something like some cards stuck one like side by side. So let me show you how to achieve this, and I let you do your quiz. This is the last one I'll show you quickly. So I think once you get familiar with the basic properties of Flexbox and Grid, go for these common patterns. How do I create a responsive? How I create a menu? How do I create a lineup card? So all I do, here is my card. So I have many cards in here. This is one card, second card, third card. So first, for the cards themselves, each card will all of them will be in one container. then I'll go ahead to make the, let me run this. Let me run this super quick. Here it is. So I use grid to do this 3-column layout. Use the grid to do this 3-column layout. And if I want to be responsive, I use media queries and define different layouts for each breakpoint. And then within the card itself, you can see I have a title, I have the description in the middle, and then the image on the bottom of the card. So basically, I go to my card and say display flex direction column. I must do flex direction column because the default is flex direction row. And here the padding 1 rem, and here this is the trick that makes this nicely aligned. Is I put here justify content space between. Justify content space between. So let me show you. If I go here and do inspect, and I'll go and you see justify content space between. If I don't put justify content space between, you see you get a different. This is the default layer, not so elegant. Picture here, top, bottom, a little bit up, not consistent. So of course you can fiddle around with margins, and good luck with margins and spaces and very complicated CSS to make them aligned nicely, or you can make use of this flex property called justify content space between. All I'm saying, flex, go ahead, do compute by yourself, use your smart algorithm that is already implemented in the browser, and space, divide the available space equally among my flexbox items. So once I do this, you can see the space is we take the space and we equally divide it and place it between the items, So there are other ways justify. There are other values that you can place in here. I think there is something called space evenly. This is not really what we want. Space between is the one to use. Space evenly, space around. Not exactly what I want. So space between is the ideal one to get that consistent look. Yeah. I hope you get the idea. So in this pattern folder, in the examples, you get common scenarios and how to achieve them using flex, grid, and media query. Okay, I think it's enough for today. Let's switch to the exam. Let me just stop this one. Okay, so let me go to e-learning. I think the exam will already be there. Check. Yeah, I think the password is CSS3. CSS3. And just stop. No need for this lockdown or anything. Just CSS3. It'll take you a few minutes. CSS number 3. 3. Yeah. I mean the number 3. All of you are able to open it? Okay, very good.
Okay, 3 minutes. Two minutes if you can please submit.